This is the LZR Project, an episodic story series by David N. Alderman. The LZR Project takes place within David's Expired Reality universe and serves as a prequel to the main novels in his Expired Reality series. You can find out more about David's Expired Reality series at davidnalderman.com. Episode number 20. Cybil Corbin ran from the Rusted Spigot and fled straight to the Pleasure District. She took shelter in the shadows of a particular alley she knew all too well and stripped the bedraggled costume from her body, peeling the tight layers of spandex from her flesh like dried glue from one's palm. Left in nothing but her undergarments, Cybil shoved her costume into a nearby trash can and then stood in the middle of the dark alley. Silence fell across her ears. She stood still in that silence for what felt like minutes. Then she heard footsteps. Footsteps from her memory, from her past. The sound of boots slapping against puddles of rainwater and filth. It was a time in the past, and she was tired of running. She had ducked into this very alley to hide from her pursuer. Unfortunately, the man had seen her and decided to follow her into the deep, dark abyss. Cybil's lungs began to tighten with the very act of conjuring up the memory of that one night David Corbin, her loving brother, had neglected to rescue her from the meaty hands of a rapist. Those hands vaporized her clothing, her protection, her shield, after which they smothered her bare skin with a violent touch that felt like sandpaper. Pain followed pain which followed pain, all of it disguised as pleasure. To the man, it was all a symphony of violins and bass and piano, but for her it had been a cacophony of ill-conceived sounds made on the garbage can lid, the chalkboard, and the empty beer can. Cybil opened her eyes and found herself on the filthy ground of the alley, her legs spread, her arms above her head. She stood to her feet and slammed her back up against the nearest wall, her mind screaming at her heart to slow down. Once she resumed normal breathing, Cybil went to the trash can and pulled out her purple tights. She stretched them on, satisfied to have some form of clothing on once again. Digging further into the same can, she found a t-shirt with a few miscellaneous stains on it. The shirt stunk of wet tobacco and beer, but she slipped it on just the same. She left the alley and went straight for the nightclub across the street, wanting nothing more than a strong drink before she would have to call her boyfriend, Nicholas, to pick her up in a nearby district. She caught a few stares entering the pink-washed nightclub, but nobody said anything to her as she took a seat at the bar. She ordered a tonic and Jewel fruit mix, paying with the credits she hid in her bra. When the pink drink arrived, she guzzled it down within a matter of seconds. She had just watched a man's head get blown to pieces, the shrapnel of his brain matter splattering across the restaurant floor like tomato sauce. The scene had flipped a switch in her, causing her to panic, to rush to the alley where she was raped so many years ago. The alley was at once her greatest fear and her sanctuary. The disdain she had for her brother had been birthed within that brick corridor, breathing life into her obsession to outdo him, to show him she wasn't a victim anymore. And yet the rape had stolen something from her, something precious, something that cannot be returned once it has been taken. Innocence. After putting away more than a few drinks, Cybil went to the dance floor and let loose in a ballet of drunken moves. "Cybil?" The voice startled her. When she turned to the man summoning her, she found the razor-blue eyes and rugged jaw of Nicholas unmistakable. He grabbed her wrists, and she turned and slapped him in the face as hard as she could, nearly stumbling over in the process. Nicholas grabbed her arm and pulled her across the dance floor, grumbling as he did so. Before they reached the exit, Cybil managed to pull her arm out of his grip. She tripped on her own feet and fell backward onto her rear end. "Don't you touch me, you walking tree!" Nicholas reached down and grabbed her arm again, this time twice as hard, and literally swung her toward the exit, nearly yanking her arm out of its socket in the process. She stumbled outside onto the sidewalk, scraping her knees as she fell to the concrete slab. In her somewhat blurred vision, she watched a young man, half the size of Nicholas, take a swing at Nicholas's face, hitting him in the cheek. Nicholas didn't even flinch. Instead, he shoved his finger into the man's eye socket until he screamed. Then Nicholas kicked the man backward and sent him tumbling halfway across the dance floor. When Nicholas approached Cybil, his eyes were bloodshot with anger. He didn't stop. He didn't slow down, even when one other potential hero leapt onto Nicholas's back and attempted to pull him down. But Nicholas was immovable, a rock, a fortress. The type of man who could have saved Cybil that one night so long ago. Nicholas simply shook the man off of him. Cybil stood to her feet and went with her boyfriend willingly. He had parked on the street, and when they both entered the vehicle and Nicholas began driving, Cybil wondered what lay in store for her at home. Nicholas had a temper, He rarely hit her, but when he did, it hurt. "Where have you been?" Nicholas asked calmly. "Is this where you've been? At the clubs? What are you doing out here in the pleasure district, smelling like garbage? You getting a little something from the old ladies?" "No," she whispered under her drunken stupor. "Then what? Please explain to me what you've been doing out here. Huh, Cybil? What the—" Cybil turned and sunk her nails into Nicholas's face. He pulled the steering wheel hard left as the car flipped and everything went black. The sounds of sirens and commotion greeted Cybil when she awoke. Her blurry vision picked up fragments of the world around her. Ambulance lights, people, a dark sky. She found herself on the ground, but she couldn't get herself to move. Her arms felt heavy like sacks of white rice, and her neck hurt if she even tried to move it a hair. Closing her eyes, she fell into darkness. When she came to again, she was in a hospital room. David sat by her bedside, his head buried in his hands. She sat up in the bed, her back aching with emotion. David lifted his head. "Cybil?" She slowly put her hand up, stopping his remarkably quick advance from his chair to her bed. Just stay over there. I'm in a lot of pain." He ignored her command and drew close to the side of her bed. "The doctor said you broke some bones, punctured a lung, and slipped a few of your discs out of alignment. But you're alive." She reached up to her face, her fingers moving softly across deep scratches and a series of stitches. Her eyes pulled David into vision, and her lips readied their poison. "Where were you, asshole?" David's eyes widened at the remark. "What? Where were you when the car rolled?" He didn't answer the question right away. Instead, he looked at the floor, his hands, and then at the ceiling before finally making eye contact with her again. "I was at work." "At work? At the LZR Project?" He nodded. "Why weren't you there to save me tonight, huh?" "Save you from what?" he asked. "The car accident." "How could I possibly know you were going to get into a car accident? In the pleasure district?" "What are you insinuating?" she asked. "I'm asking you a question. How could I know?" "I heard your question. Why is it you're always there for everyone else but not for me? I'm your own sister, but you always seem to be off saving other people, accomplishing other missions. You have no time for me. Where were you that night in the alley, huh? Where were you?" He took a step back, distancing himself from the bed. "I don't know what medicines they have you on, but I'll make sure to talk to the doctor about it right away." "I'm not loopy, shit for brains. You're always there for others, but never for me, and I don't understand why. Do you not love me?" Her eyes felt watery, but she didn't dare cry in front of her brother. His widened eyes seemed to show offense, maybe even remorse. "You're my sister, Cybil. Of course I love you." "Then where were you tonight?" "How was I supposed to know you were going to be in the pleasure district?" he asked. "What were you even doing there?" "None of your business." "If it's none of my business, then how would I know you were going to be there? I'm not a fortune teller." Cybil broke out into tears. When David drew close to console her, she used what little strength she had and shoved him down into his chair. "Just get away from me. Just get away. Stay away. I don't want anything to do with you right now. Just leave. Get out. Get away." David stood to his feet, put his hands up in a surrendering motion, and left the room. Cybil cried herself to sleep. Thank you for listening to the LZR Project. If you are interested in reading more of David's Expired Reality series, please check out the author's webpage at davidnalderman.com.